You are listening to the Hero's... Oh, you sniffed, you...
I'm sorry, I was laughing.
You are listening to the Hero's Journey podcast. I'm Jeff Garvin.
And I'm Dan Zarzana.
Let the journey begin.
Welcome to the show.
Welcome to the show, Dan. In this podcast, we examine classic and contemporary books and films through the lens of the hero's journey.
If you're new to the podcast, maybe pause this and go listen to episode 0, in which we introduce the hero's journey using Star Wars and Harry Potter.
I don't know why he has a Muppet voice
Why?
there.
Yeah, why? Okay.
I don't know.
Moving on.
This is a very special holiday edition of the podcast, episode 2, Die Hard.
Obviously, one of the greatest Christmas movies ever made, right?
There's no argument.
There's an argument on the internet, but as far as you and I are concerned...
There's an argument on the internet about whether the Earth is flat. So I put those people who think Die Hard isn't the best Christmas movie in the same category as flat earthers.
Okay, good.
Let's just categorize them all.
Wow. We're going to get an email.
Yeah,
about
that's the internet. So, spoiler alert, we will be discussing the story in its entirety. So if you haven't seen Die Hard, then I honestly don't know what you're doing with your life.
What's wrong with you? Die Hard was released in 1988 by 20th Century Fox and directed by John McTiernan.
The screenplay was written by Jeb Stewart and Stephen E. D'Souza, based on the 1979 novel Nothing Lasts Forever by Roderick Thorpe.
Did you know that before?
I had no idea.
Yeah.
That it was based on a book.
Yeah. Watching opening credits and it says based on the novel, and I'm just like, what?
Yeah. And I didn't read it, but the novel that it's based on is a sequel, and the main character is Joe Leland, not John McClane, and he's not saving his wife, but his daughter and his grandchildren in the 40-story Klaxon oil building.
Okay.
And in the book, he knows the terrorist, who's not named Hans, but Anton Little Tony Gruber.
Little Tony.
I just picture...
Hey, they kept Tony. There's one of the terrorists was Tony.
That's true. I just keep picturing Alan Rickman being like, "Hey, it's Little Tony.
Little Tony Gruber.
Hey, put down the gun."
There you go with your top-notch Gene Hackman impression again.
Wow. But he does work with LAPD Sergeant Al Powell.
Wow.
And he is barefoot for most of the book. So those are the sort of things that are common with the book and the movie.
Okay. Fists with your toes.
I tried it as I was watching the movie, and it was it's great.
I got nothing out of it.
Really?
Nope, didn't help at all.
Huh.
Fists with your toes is not a thing.
We're not even to the ordinary world yet. So just hammer down here. Slow down. Simmer down.
Also worth noting, the role of John McClane was offered to action stars Sylvester Stallone, Harrison Ford, Don Johnson, all of whom turned it down.
This movie is epic. Can you imagine the career change for Don Johnson if he said yes to this movie? Or maybe it wouldn't have been as great. I don't know.
He was deep into Miami Vice at the time, wasn't he?
I'm glad Harrison Ford turned it down, though, because he would have made it a Harrison Ford movie. And I love Harrison Ford.
Which is wrong how?
It just needed the Bruce Willis TV humor to carry it. It's such an over-the-top movie. It needed that light aspect to really make that guy relatable. Otherwise, it would have been Air Force One in a tall building, you know?
Well, okay.
And then you would have had to cast Gary Oldman as the German terrorist. Okay, so just one last thing before we dive in, which is I put in my DVD that I bought, 15 years ago, while I was in college maybe. And the thing that I loved about it was the DVD coming attractions is all about Fox DVD, the amazing digital video disc technology.
Wow.
And the thing that they kept harping on about was the 3D cutting edge menus.
It's like the menu is a feature.
And you remember how much we came to hate DVD menus because you'd put the DVD in and it was like 6 minutes of like, okay, I pushed play film and now it's taking me through a 3D maze.
Right.
Like, I just want to watch the movie. And this DVD is like, you press, scene selection and it's like zooms in on the building and then goes down like to this doorway and then the doorway opens and it's like, oh my God, just get to if I were watching VHS, I'd be on Act 2 by now.
Yeah. It's like you're pounding the skip button.
Exactly. So without further ado, Die Hard.
So the first stage of any hero's journey, whether we are talking about Joseph Campbell's The Hero with a Thousand Faces or Christopher Vogler's The Writer's Journey, is The hero in the ordinary world of common day is the way Campbell puts it. At the beginning of Die Hard, we see our hero, John McClane, white-knuckled on an airplane, flying into Los Angeles to visit his estranged, separated wife.
Yeah.
And his 2 children for Christmas. It is Christmas Eve, and he's going to meet his wife at the office Christmas party.
A couple of things that I noticed about this portion of the movie. The first is that first shot is like an exterior of the plane landing, and then we cut to McClane's hand clutching the armrest, right, and you see his wedding ring very clearly. And so I think it's a signal that the most important thing about John McClane is his relationship with his wife. And of course, that's the emotional turning point of the movie.
That's what gives the human perspective rather than just a cop in a building trying to save hostages.
Most of our World of Common Day is revealed with Argyle in the limo. So we learn a little bit on the plane. He's having a chat with the husband. And then we're in the limo, and it's very like pedestrian expo. But Argyle, played by Devereaux White, does this great job of hiding the expo with his personality. He's just such a charismatic guy, and it's his first time driving a limo, and it's McClane's first time riding it. So we learn a lot about it, and it's all through that performance.
Yeah.
And then the only other thing I wanted to say is side notes. As I'm watching this, from 2017, he's smoking in the airport, and I'm like, oh my God, how 1988 is that?
No airport is that empty on Christmas Eve. The luggage conveyor belt, there's like 5 people at it. Right. No, that is not.
Yeah.
Maybe they could have got some more extras.
They didn't spend their budget on extras.
It's just, that struck me as interesting.
The other things that struck me was the xenophobia. Like when he just gets to the Nakatomi Tower and he's talking to Takagi, who we'll meet in a moment, he makes a joke about not celebrating Christmas in Japan. And then Tagaki makes like a Pearl Harbor joke.
He's like, oh, Pearl Harbor didn't work out, so we got you, turntables or something?
Tape decks.
Oh, tape decks,
And I'm so like,
right.
wow, this is such a pre-9/11 world where the airport is so free and you can make jokes about Pearl Harbor while you're in a tall building.
Right.
It was just such a different political landscape. And then the next scene one of the second scenes in the movie is Ellis, the sleazy sales guy pursuing Holly, just relentlessly sexually harassing her and doing these come-ons.
Oh, sexually harassing her.
Oh, yeah.
He's just asking for a date.
Yeah, but over and over again in an inappropriate way, knowing that she's married, knowing that her husband is coming. And I just thought, my first thought was, well, at least it's not like that anymore. And then I think about the wave of, accusations that have unfolded. Apparently we haven't made that much progress on that front since.
In 20 years.
And
30 years? Yeah. Wow, 30 years. Maths.
So there are some extremely anti-feminist veins in this movie that I will enjoy revealing as we go through this plot.
Anti-feminist veins. Wow.
Yeah, big time. You'll probably yell at me, but
something else that establishes the ordinary world for John is that he discovers that his wife Holly has reverted to her maiden name, Gennaro.
Yeah, well, what she says is they see Mrs. and they think you're on your way out the door. You're not going to work here long because you're going to go have kids. The next stage of the hero's journey is call to adventure. This is where the hero is presented with a challenge that renders him incapable of going on living in the comfort of the ordinary world. McClane has gotten off the plane. He's arrived at the tower.
Nakatomi Plaza.
Right, which is just the 20th Century Fox building in Century City. By the way, apparently it was a set designer who had the idea to use that building, which wasn't yet completed.
Right, yeah. Fox paid itself rent.
Brilliant.
To use it as
Brilliant. Anyway, he's in Ellis's, the bathroom attached to his office. Ellis, the sleazy sales guy.
I hate that guy.
Yeah, everyone hates it. Even Hans hates that guy. So he's calling Argyle to check in when he hears gunfire. That gunfire is his invitation to get involved.
Yeah. And he does. He immediately runs to the door and begins evaluating the situation.
The cop instincts kick in right away.
Exactly.
We didn't disagree, everybody. We made it all the way past Call to Adventure.
After the call to adventure is a segment called Refusal of the Call, where the hero rejects the opportunity to enter the special world and undertake whatever special quest has been presented. I watched the movie a couple of times and had a little bit of difficulty thinking of a refusal of the call.
Yeah, me too.
For John. Yeah. Because he is a cop. He does act on instinct. But one thing that he does do, after he hears the gunfire, he assesses the situation. He sees that he is vastly outnumbered, terribly outgunned.
Outmanned, outnumbered, outplanned.
Oh, wow, Hamilton.
Yeah.
Attaboy. So he runs up the stairs to a different floor, finds a phone. Oh, we should also add that while McClane is in Ellis's bathroom freshening up, he calls Argyle in the limo, and the phone dies.
Right.
He runs upstairs to find a different phone, and that phone is also dead. So then he finds a place to hide as he's running around these floors, and he encounters Mr. Takagi, the president of Nakatomi Corporation and Holly's boss, who has been taken hostage. Well, he's already a hostage, but he's been taken to a different room by Hans and a couple of the other terrorists because they want the computer codes from Mr. Takagi.
Yeah.
John hides under a table watching this kind of interrogation take place, followed immediately by the murder of Mr. Takagi by Hans Gruber when he just shoots him in the head because Mr. Takagi says, I can't give you the codes, so you'll just have to kill me.
Yeah.
And Hans just like, okay. Blam. Shortly thereafter, there's a scene of John kind of berating himself, saying, why didn't you stop them? Like acknowledging that he did not act.
Yeah.
He refused the call.
Yeah, I had the same difficulty, and I identified the same stuff, is that he's refusing at first to be the hero. He's trying to get outside help. Someone else will fix this. I'll call the cops. I'll do, you know.
He pulls a fire alarm.
Yeah, right.
To try to get some other unit to come and help, and he stands at the window and he watches as this line of fire trucks with their sirens going suddenly turn their lights off and turn around and go away. He doesn't know what has happened.
Yeah.
So he's beside himself with frustration of like, why isn't anybody coming to help?
Yeah. Well, and some of that is that refusal from without. I mean, Hans thwarts him.
Correct.
In a way, Hans is forcing him to be a hero.
Right, because the terrorists intercept the fire call and tell emergency operators that it's a false alarm, don't waste your time.
Right.
All of this is confirmed when terrorist Tony finds John and he says, the fire has been called off, my friend. There is no one coming to help you.
Yeah.
And right then John knows, all right, I'm on my own.
I think it happens a little bit later than that.
Really?
Yeah. So Tony confronts him, right? But he doesn't shoot Tony. He's still not clear that this is life or death. He tackles him and they roll down the stairs and Tony's presumably his neck or his back breaks and he's dead. But you can see in McClane's face that he's checking his pulse. He didn't intend to kill him. He's still not taking this on. And then this is to me, the most symbolic part of the refusal. He actually takes Tony's shoes off and physically tries to put on the villain's shoes. That's like the ultimate rejection of the hero energies. I'm actually going to try to change my situation by stealing some of the villain's energy. And of course it doesn't work. Because to me, the barefoot thing is this is the trial that's before you. You must take this down barefoot. And he tries to reject that by putting on the villain's shoes. I just thought that was a really interesting choice.
Interesting. We should add that John is barefoot because while he was in Ellis's bathroom freshening up, he has also taken his shoes off and he's taken off his coat and his shirt and he's getting casual. Then the gunfire happens.
Yeah, the first line of the movie is the sales guy saying, here's what you do. Here's how you deal with plane travel. You go home, you take off your shoes and socks in the hotel, you make fists with your toes on the carpet, and that's supposed to relieve tension. So he's barefoot for the rest of the movie.
It's interesting that you are putting this confrontation with Tony in the refusal of the call, because I think that is crossing of the first threshold, which is the next segment. While you're right, he doesn't want to kill Tony. I think he wants to apprehend him. So he gets the drop on Tony, and Tony says, you're not going to hurt me because you're a policeman, and policemen have rules. And John says,
yeah. That's what my captain keeps telling me.
That was John crossing the first threshold. I'm in this now. That's his verbal commitment.
I have a different take.
I'm going for this now.
I have a different take on that.
Let's fight.
But let's talk about meeting with the mentor. So traditionally, the meeting with the mentor is the hero receiving counsel on how to operate in the special world And the mentor gives him some kind of supernatural aid, like a lightsaber or a magic wand. And this is a tough one. I think the absence of a mentor is part of what makes the stakes so high in Die Hard, because McClane is on his own. The mentor energy is there in this movie, but interestingly enough, it's mostly expressed by villains. And so I have a couple notes throughout where the mentor energy is expressed.
Okay.
But I think that first mentor energy is Tony saying,
You won't hurt me. Oh, yeah? Why not? Because you're a policeman. There are rules for policemen.
he's showing him, this is the special world, dude. Your police rules don't apply here. So I think it's interesting that it happens at this part of the movie, because I think that is the first real touch of mentor energy.
I'll buy that for $1. All right.
McClane's been scrambling. Okay, so
I still think that is John's crossing the threshold when he follows that immediately with, that's what my captain keeps telling me.
the first act of this movie is so compressed. So much of this stuff happens, simultaneously and mixed up. So I'll buy that as the crossing of the threshold. But let's move to crossing of the threshold.
Before we do that,
Yeah.
do you feel that Sergeant Al Powell, who we'll meet later in the film, do you feel that he's some kind of a mentor energy? He motivates John. He consoles John. He feeds John information about what's going on the outside of the building.
I feel very similarly, but after watching it for the second time in a row, I kind of disqualified Al as a mentor.
Okay.
Primarily because the information is mostly flowing the other way. And so I see Al as an ally, certainly, and maybe as another half of the hero energy, the part that needs to be redeemed into action after having been inactive since his, the shooting incident he reveals in Act 3. So no, I didn't count him as a mentor.
Okay.
But I wouldn't hold it against you if you did. So let's jump into officially discussing crossing of the threshold. The hero has to pass a barrier to enter the special world, and this crossing of that barrier represents the hero's commitment to taking on the adventure. You had said it's his assault of Tony, which I get, but to me, the moment when McClane finally embraces the hero energy is when he takes Tony's machine gun. He's now seizing the weapon, right? And he takes the CB, which to me is the closest thing to supernatural aid, riffing off of Tony being a mentor energy. It's his way to communicate with the outside world. That's his one. That's the thing that gets him through the rest of the adventure, that CB, his connectivity to the outside world. So he takes the machine gun and he sends Tony's body down the elevator as a message to Hans. This is his declaration of war on Hans and his minions.
Absolutely.
Whether outside help is coming or not, I'm on to you. Now I have a machine gun, ho, ho, ho.
Right.
Which also is really the beginning of this being a great Christmas movie. I mean, when you can write ho, ho, ho
on a
in
dead
your
body.
enemy's blood,
On a dead body. Yeah.
that is the very essence of Christmas.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so supernatural aid comes from a dead threshold guardian. All right, we're going to take a short break, and we'll be back with Act 2. All right, well, first of all, Dan and I want to thank the literally hundreds of you that have downloaded and listened to our podcast. It's extremely rewarding to know that the time we're putting into this is paying off in terms of people actually listening to it and enjoying it. So thank you. Second point of discussion, it has come to our attention through some listener comments and emails that our voices sound similar, almost identical. That Dan and I sound alike, and so it's hard to tell who's speaking. And so we're going to disambiguate our voices for you right now. I'm Jeff. This is Jeff speaking, and this is Dan speaking. And clearly, this was going to be a good bit.
Oh, we couldn't get through it without laughing.
I couldn't get shaken.
That's
Whatever.
okay. This is actually Dan speaking.
And this is Jeff. So whatever that
I
sounds
think I have
like.
the more effeminate sounding voice, I think people have said. Slurp. That's Jeff's coffee slurp. I do not slurp my coffee because I'm a classy lady. All right, welcome back.
Welcome back, Dan.
Let's dive into Act 2 here. First segment of which is the Road of Trials, if you're Joseph Campbell. If you are a student of Christopher Vogler, you'll call this Tests, Allies, and Enemies. John McClane has very few allies in his hero's journey. Just about all of the characters who are supposed to be allies, like the police department, are threshold guardians or tricksters, or they're not helpful at all. John has to do this all by himself. His only ally is his CB radio communications partner, Sergeant Al Powell, who was a desk jockey. That's his term for himself. I'm not disparaging officers who work at a desk.
Not at all.
Who was on his way home Christmas Eve when he got a call to check out a disturbance at the Nakatomi Plaza. He has since been with John on the CB radio, and that's the only ally, I feel at least, that John has had throughout this entire journey.
Yeah, I concur. I mean, we've got Tagaki, the VP of Nakatomi, who gets axed very early on.
Yeah.
You got
Argyle, sorta.
Yeah.
He does.
Yeah.
He does.
Argyle
take
has
out,
a payoff.
He does take out one of.
Don't give it away yet. Good point. Argyle's an ally.
He's kind of a trickster, though. He's kind of a goofy comic relief character. But I don't think he does anything to subvert John's efforts.
No.
There is the scene where John is saying, Argyle, please tell me you heard the gunshots and are calling the cops, man.
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
you cut to Argyle, and he's in the limo in the parking garage. He's got the music blasting, and he's talking to his girl on the phone. So.
Yeah. And Holly isn't really an ally. The actions she takes don't assist John in saving anybody. But she does have faith in him. At one point, Carl comes downstairs and smashes the drinks with the butt of his machine gun.
Yeah.
And she says, he's still alive.
Still alive.
And the assistant says, what do you mean? Only John could drive people that bad. So she believes in him, which is an ally energy.
Right.
I did want to do a little name-dropping side note.
Okay.
So Reginald Vell Johnson, who plays Al Powell, is probably best known as the dad on Family Matters. He played the dad on Family Matters for 9 seasons. He has 104 acting credits to his name, and he's still working. I got to be on Family Matters once in, I want to say, the late 90s. I didn't have any scenes with him, but he was the master of that set. He kind of played host on that sitcom set.
Oh, cool. Nice guy?
Name-dropping? Yeah.
Nice guy?
Absolutely.
As for enemies, I think it's very clear that Hans Gruber and his band of terrorists are the enemy here.
Yeah.
At one point later in the movie, I believe, third act, some FBI guys get involved.
Johnson & Johnson.
Johnson & Johnson. And they actually attack John physically when they're in the helicopter. So they become an enemy, but not intentionally. They think John is a terrorist because he's on the roof firing a machine gun.
Well, let's do a sound off. It's an interesting cast. So we've got Theo, who's the tech expert, played by Clarence Gilliard, who also played Sundown in Top Gun.
No.
Yep.
Okay. I knew he looked familiar, but I couldn't place him.
And then Carl is played by Alexander Godunov.
Okay.
And I have some info about him. Another name dropping moment. It's so interesting to watch these movies from the 80s and 90s and see people that I kind of know or I kind of worked with. Is so exciting. Alexander Godunov was a classically trained Russian ballet dancer who defected to the U.S. in 1979.
That explains the physique.
Right?
This dude is ripped and lean. And
I had the privilege to be in the same acting class with him for a short time, about 2 years before he died in 1995. He died of complications due to alcoholism.
Oh.
I remember he was a huge presence. I mean, when he was tall and he was broad, and when he walked into the room, he drew everyone's focus. And I remember before scenes, he would kind of pace the stage humming to himself. I mean, he was just a huge presence. He really tried to have a great movie career, and after this movie, he just kept getting typecast as that guy. But he had
the big bad guy.
He had so much more to offer as an actor. He was an incredible performer. And then, of course, Hans Gruber.
Yeah.
Did you know this was Alan Rickman's first feature film performance ever?
No.
Yeah. It's his first
How
feature
weird.
film. Unbelievable, right?
He's in every movie.
Yep.
This was the first one?
This is his first. He did TV, a lot of British TV before. This is his first. And what a role to be your first feature film.
Right. Opposite, at the time, TV superstar Bruce Willis, because he was on Moonlighting.
Right.
He would film Moonlighting during the day, and then at night he would go to Nakatomi Plaza.
Well, and there was
and film Die Hard.
And there was a lot of discussion about him being a casting liability. They were afraid that he wasn't going to.
Are we talking about Bruce Willis?
Sorry,
or
moving
Alan
on to
Rickman?
Bruce Willis. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Why was he a casting liability?
They were afraid he couldn't carry a an action film because he was a TV guy. Back then, TV, there wasn't a lot of crossover. If you went from TV to movies, you certainly went TV to movies and not the other way around. And people thought of you as he was on a comedy. Moonlighting was a comedy.
Yeah,
and
a romantic comedy, too.
He leapt from that to action movies. Very unusual for the time. That the first Die Hard posters did not feature his face. It was the giant tower and the explosions.
Right. I did not know that.
Sorry, I sidelined you. So, yes, Hans Gruber, amazing. And that first scene where he sort of presides over the hostages with his notebook open, almost like a preacher.
Like a prayer book or something.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I would bet dimes to donuts that was Alan Rickman's choice.
Yeah.
That's such an actor moment.
Another enemy, I'm gonna call Harry Ellis an enemy.
Oh, yeah.
He's the smarmy used car salesman guy who's after John's wife.
Right.
He's played by Hart Bochner, who, when he does his salesman smile, oh my God, you just want to punch him in the face.
Yeah, he's detestable
so
in
good
such
at that.
a fun way.
He's so good at that. I felt bad like hating that guy because he did such a great job.
All the bad guys are so lovable, detestable, though, because like Richard Thornburg, the ambulance-chasing reporter, played by William Atherton.
Right. Who we love from Ghostbusters.
Yes, and he's such a douche canoe, but you... are we gonna bleep that? But you love hating him. He's so much fun to hate.
I think that's it for
enemies. No. We got another '80s superstar B-cast guys. Deputy Chief of Police Dwayne T. Robinson, played by Paul Gleason.
Absolutely,
of Breakfast Club.
Who
fame.
you know as the principal from Breakfast Club. Absolutely. He's not an enemy though.
Oh yeah,
he's not an.
Oh, I think so.
All right. Well, then school me.
His first action he takes is to berate Al Powell, our sort of secondary hero, and try to take command of the scene. And everything he does thwarts what John McClane is trying to do inside. He plays into the hands of Hans Gruber and listens to his demands and subsequently gets the FBI involved, which is exactly what Gruber wants. I mean, he's maybe an unwitting enemy, but certainly a force of opposition to what McClane is trying to accomplish.
Okay. If we're equating force of opposition to enemy, then...
I'll use it loosely. I hear you on that one. Tests.
We've already discussed how John and Tony have their fight, and John takes Tony's CB radio.
Right.
And then he runs to the roof of the building, and on top of the helipad, uses the secure emergency CB channel to try to call for help.
Yep.
And there is a threshold guardian on the other end of that line, an operator, and she tells John, I'm sorry, this line is for emergencies only. And John's like, no kidding you, I sound like I'm trying to order a pizza.
Yeah. No kidding. I think that was the exact quote.
I may have removed some expletives.
I also think that was a little energy of the refusal of the call to adventure from without. Nope, you're not getting any help. Go be the hero.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah.
And meanwhile, Hans is monitoring the radio.
Yes.
And sends Franco and Carl, who's enraged. Carl is Tony's brother, and Carl is enraged that his brother is dead. He's out for blood.
Blood, absolutely.
Alexander Godunov is so good in that role. You just love to hate him.
So there are just a series of tests that follow where McClane, he has to escape the rooftop when Carl...
But let's stick to that one test, right? So McClane escapes Franco and Carl, and the emergency responders hear gunshots, and they send a patrol car. So McClane wins that, because he gets the outside help to come in and he escapes getting killed. I would call the next test when Sergeant Powell arrives. He goes inside, senses something's wrong, but he doesn't want to get involved, so he's going back to the car. McClane sees his car and says, what's going on? Where's the cavalry? So he's trying to break the window with a chair, right? And then two of Hans's minions, Heinrich and Franco. Heinrich and Franco. Marco? Okay. They accost him. And McClane shoots Heinrich, and you're right, it is Marco. You're totally right. And then there's this great sequence under the zigzag-shaped conference table.
Yeah,
it's such a great sequence.
Where John is crawling under the table, and Marco is standing on top of the table, just firing into the table.
No more table. Where are you going, pal? Next time you have a chance to kill someone, don't hesitate.
More mentor energy from a villain.
Yes.
So McClane shoots Marco, sees Powell pulling away, throws Marco's body out the window, right? So you're Powell, you're in your car. First, a dead body drops, and then machine gun fire from the quote terrorists, and he's just like, oh god,
backing up, and he backs off an embankment.
And this is where the action movie kicks in, and I just picture these writers sitting around going, how can we make this more effed up? Like, the cops arrive, a dead body drops, machine gun fire. So Powell calls for backup. this is an important impact. I think McClane passes the test, right? He gets Powell's attention for sure.
Absolutely, very
But
clearly.
that makes Powell get on the radio, which alerts the press. So he's activating all these forces that will eventually come to bear down and make the process worse. Because really, the police don't help. They make things worse. The press coming doesn't help. It makes things worse.
Absolutely makes it worse. You mentioned this in a previous episode where you said you love it when the hero doing the right thing makes things worse.
Absolutely love it. And I think that's a part of the writing process is you come up with a great idea to solve a problem, and it creates 9 more problems, which of course is the point of a story in essence is a series of exciting problem solutions. But when you're in it, writing it, or if you're the hero of the story, it's just a nightmare. Everything you do makes everything worse. Okay, so I saw 2 more tests. Do you want to point them out? Or
Well, I've got one more.
Okay.
And that is when the police begin to storm the building and the armored car runs up the stairs, and then the terrorists have a rocket launcher and they begin firing it at the armored car. And then John has to eliminate that rocket team because, there's serious risk of loss of life now because there is a rocket launcher in the building.
That's legit. I see that bleeding into approach to the Inmost Cave, but I guess I'll defend that claim when we get there.
Okay.
To me, there are 2 other tests in this portion. One is McClane radios Hans for the first time and matches wits with him. Hans calls him a cowboy.
Oh, interesting. That's what I felt was the approach. Approach to the cave.
Interesting. Okay, well, I'll play this out.
Ooh, we gonna fight again.
Yeah.
We gonna fight again.
So, we have the introduction of the infamous catchphrase, yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
You're going to have to bleep that.
I know. McClane finds the detonators in Marco's bag, and Hans realizes they're missing, and now his heist is in jeopardy. The stakes go up.
For Hans. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and for
John,
and
because,
for John.
because now the thunder's coming.
Right. So Hans is now taking McClane more seriously and sends all his men to go find the detonators. And then the last test I see is, McClane calls Powell on the radio and gives him all the info he's collected about the terrorists. He's now sort of creating transparency. And this is a test he fails for 2 reasons. One, he actually puts more lives at risk by transmitting this information. He doesn't mean to, but now all the cops and the SWAT team and the FBI people come and show up, and now all those people are at risk. It's not just about the guys inside anymore. And then 2, he's playing right into Hans's hands. Har, har, har. Because Hans wants the FBI to come.
Yes.
And for reasons we find out later. So to me, that is the key test fail that launches him into approach to the Inmost Cave.
Right.
What is flip? That's the sound effect of the book pages or whatever that we use.
Oh, got it.
So the approach to the Inmost Cave, just to clarify, is where the hero reaches the edge of the dangerous place where the object of his quest is hidden. It's not at all surprising that you and I have differing opinions here because essentially, if John McClane is Luke Skywalker, he arrives at the Death Star 10 minutes into the movie and spends the rest of the movie in the building.
Yeah.
So this most dangerous place is an event, not a physical location in this part of the movie. So tell me your Inmost Cave, and I'll tell you mine, and we'll argue and fight over it. Go.
Well, before I do, there was one thing that I forgot to mention during the tests, allies, and enemies phase. And I did allude to it when I said that the police were not at all allies. There is a scene when the police are beginning to storm the building in their failed attempt to gain entry.
Yeah.
And there is a cop who is running through a rose bush, and he gets pricked by rose thorns twice. And he's like coming at the camera, and he keeps going, ow, ow. And I'm like, how is this? This is not like the tough badass who's going to save John McClane from these terrorists. This guy's like recoiling from rose bushes.
And then, by the way, to get into the building through the glass doors, they use a welding torch to try, instead of like every other piece of glass in this movie is shot and breaks except the front door, which they apparently need a welding torch to get through, or a cutting torch, whatever that's called. Okay, approach the Inmost Cave. So here's how I see it. The odds are starting to pile up against McClane. Holly has an audience with Hans to negotiate, bathroom breaks for the hostages and the couch for the pregnant lady.
Right.
And we know that her visibility to Hans is only going to make things worse.
Right.
On top of that, reporter Richard Thornburg shows up and publicizes the terrorism angle, just like Hans wants.
Yep.
So now he's got that going for him. On top of that, Deputy Police Chief Dwayne T. Johnson shows up and admonishes Powell and calls in the SWAT team. SWAT moves in. Hans and company react with gunfire and rockets. And now the cops are totally overwhelmed. So McClane now has to bail out the cops. He has to stop taking care of the hostages and bail out the cops. So he sends explosives down the shaft in the chair and blows out a floor of the building. He saves lives and he kills more of Hans's henchmen. But it pretty much makes FBI involvement inevitable at this point. It's clearly a terrorist situation from the outside.
Yeah.
Another part of the approach is Ellis, the sleazebag salesman, tries to bargain with Hans.
Yeah.
And he identifies McClane.
Yes. By name.
Both to Hans and the press.
Right.
Which pays off later.
Right.
But fails to persuade him to give up, and predictably Hans shoots him. Side note. Ellis is my least favorite part of this movie. If he really were the best salesman, the VP of International Business Development at this multinational corporation, he would be a skilled negotiator, cocaine or no cocaine. He'd be a skilled negotiator. And I think if he'd been written that way, it would have made the movie better. He would have been a legitimate threat to McClane for the claim of Holly. Holly might be really taken in by this charismatic, successful guy who sees her as a partner and acknowledges her in front of... I mean, Ellis does acknowledge her in front of the boss and in front of her husband. That's the one thing he does that's really charming.
Yeah.
And if he were a strong negotiator, it would have been even more poignant when Hans shoots him. It would have made Hans more lethal. So I really didn't like...
Instead, he was just a pest.
I didn't like the way it was played. I didn't think you needed the comedy. You had all these funny sort of bumbling police guys and stuff. That was the part I thought could have been done. Also, there's just more racism. He had that speech about the camel jockeys and the Hebes and the Northern Irish. It's like, come on, dude. Could have been so much better. That's my sidebar on Ellis.
I agree with you.
The end of the approach, Hans makes his demands to the cops, and agents Johnson and Johnson show up.
Right.
Robert Davi! Robert Davi, Goonies.
Yeah.
Everybody's in this movie.
Love that guy.
He's so good.
Yeah.
All right, so that's my take on the approach. I'm curious to hear yours.
Well, I don't want to say it now because that was great.
Thank you.
Mine's a little more. Wow. Okay. Well, at this point in the film, John has adjusted to being in the special world. He understands what's at stake. He understands how to operate. He's in it now. His goal now, at least if we're talking about Campbell's text, is to get to the heart of the special world. And that is Hans Gruber. Because without Hans Gruber committing the crime that he is committing tonight, there's no special world. It's just he's at a Christmas party.
Yeah.
So when John calls Hans Gruber on the radio, and you've already discussed this moment, and they have their battle of wits.
I got to agree with you. I think you nailed it.
And Hans tries to get John to identify his name, and instead they settle on Mr. Cowboy.
Yeah.
To me, that's John knocking on the door. He's contacting Hans directly.
I
saying,
totally agree.
I am your enemy, and I'm coming for you.
That's very astute. I totally agree with you. Clearly, in retrospect, having heard you say it, that's the beginning of the approach.
And something else that I noticed in this scene, of course, this is the first scene where the Yippee-ki-yay famous line comes in. He only says it once in this movie. In my head, that is John McClane's repeated catchphrase. Maybe he says it more in the sequels, but he only says it one time in this film.
And to me, what makes it memorable is Alan Rickman doing his German accent and making it sound ridiculous at the end. What did you say? Yippee-ki-yay, a mother. And it's the way he totally messes up the emphasis of mother as though he doesn't know what that word is. That makes it so great.
The Ordeal is a Vogler segment that is, as you've stated in previous episodes, a conflation of several Campbellian elements.
I just want to say conflation to match the number of times I said conflations in prior episodes. There's another word that I'll remember that I constantly say too.
Transmute.
I hate you so much.
So what's the ordeal? It's the moment where the hero is in a life or death situation and they emerge changed. That's the Vogler perspective. Do we want to do the Vogler perspective and then we can discuss Campbell's elements separately? I think that's probably the better way to do it, right?
It's interesting that this is a bump for you. I boiled this down into 3 bullet points.
Did you?
The ordeal, yeah.
Interesting. Okay, well, I'll try to get through this quickly then, because now I feel like I've overthought it.
It's easy to do that when we're doing this analysis.
So at some point in the film, Hans goes up to the floor just below the roof. On the ceiling of the floor below the roof, the terrorists have attached uncomfortable amounts of C4 explosives.
Uncomfortable is a good word.
And Hans has gone up to check on the status of those explosives to make sure that they are still intact so that his plan can continue. John finds his way up there, and this is the first face-to-face meeting of John and Hans.
Totally.
Hans pretends to be a Nakatomi employee, and he affects this bad American accent.
It's possibly the most seething commentary on American culture I've ever heard from a British actor. Just the snivel. I managed to get out of there.
Yeah.
He's just like clearly just on America.
Yeah. So they have a conversation. Hans has introduced himself as Bill Clay.
Magically, there's like a Rolodex behind him.
Yeah,
in that
like
shot.
a floor directory
Yeah.
for some reason in this, what looks like a maintenance area. Here's the part about this section I don't get. How did John know that Bill Clay was actually Hans? When he gives him the handgun, it seems like he thinks that Hans is Bill Clay, but it turns out that the handgun is empty because when John starts walking away, Hans pulls the trigger, thinking he's going to shoot.
I agree
John.
with you.
How did that?
It's a wonderfully tense and almost playful scene between the two of them. I think the way Bruce Willis played it, the way McTiernan played it was, hey, you're setting up a trap. You're going to make Hans overconfident so he gives himself away. Because if you think about it, if those 3 guys hadn't magically come up the elevator in like 3 seconds after Hans got on the radio, it would have been a great drop on Hans.
Okay. So, as you've stated, the 3 terrorist a-holes come up the elevator as John and Hans are facing each other down, and the doors open and just unleash hell in forms of hot lead come shooting out of those 3 machine guns. Although this is the demise of Fabio Terrorist, John gets him immediately.
Yes. In the screenplay, they describe him as having long flowing locks like a rock drummer.
Oh my God, that is such an 80s statement,
Right?
So there's a 3rd terrorist in the elevator along
Fritz.
with Carl. Is it Fritz?
Yeah.
Is he 80s sweater terrorist?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, because I couldn't find a lot of these guys' names, and I didn't hear them referenced in dialogue and stuff, so I just gave them all nicknames.
You didn't write them on your forearm in Sharpie as you were watching the film?
So John manages to dispatch 2 of the terrorists, Fritz and Fabio now, but Carl and Hans, the 2 most dangerous terrorists, are still alive, and John has taken refuge in a glass room, barefoot, and Hans realizes, hey, we shoot the glass out and the guy's gonna shred his feet if he tries to run, which he does, because Carl throws one of his flashbangs and John takes that opportunity to get out of that room through an emergency exit. But that 2 minutes of just constant gunfire and computers exploding all around him and glass shattering has to have been the most terrifying moment for John McClane so far.
Totally agree 100%. Side note, John McClane's once white tank top is now almost completely black. It's just the most disgusting garment in action movie history. That must have been a continuity nightmare. Like, they must have had 15 different tank tops dyed different shades because it gets darker and more messed up as he goes from the purity of white to now he's killed all these people and it gets darker and darker and darker. And I felt sorry for the script supervisor and the costume designer because they're probably like, wait, we're shooting 169 today. We got to roll back to the level 3 darkness tank top.
Right.
But those little details are what you don't notice it when you're watching, but when you're watching it the second or third time, you go, oh, wow, he's got a cut. Now he's got 2 cuts. Now his feet are messed up. Now his tank top, that's all stuff you got to take account of. And when you're shooting a back then, the way they did it, I'm sure it's all digital now. The way they would do that is they would have a file for each costume change. Well, since he's wearing the same costume the whole time, they would take a Polaroid after each scene. And so in that costume designer's folder, they would have Polaroids with the scene number and the shooting date paper clipped. So if you had to reshoot that scene, you could go, oh, he does have this, or he does have his machine gun, or the badge is on this side of his belt, or whatever, to make sure that that's correct. And on a movie of this magnitude, they absolutely would have had that engaged. So that was just the moment in the movie where I go, wow, the attention to detail, even though he's wearing the same costume, is really top notch.
I think the ordeal is multi-staged. This is part of the ordeal, but there are a few other moments that I think are also ordeals. Later on, he has a one-on-one fist fight with Carl.
No. Okay. Not at all. I totally disagree. What else?
Wow. Okay. The rooftop sequence when he has to try to he has realized that the roof is going to blow. No, I reject it. Okay, good.
Because I think the reward seizing the sword stage is one of the clearest parts of this movie and screenplay, which we're about to get to. So now that I've rejected and prevented you from speaking, let's do reward seizing the sword.
Yeah, go ahead.
So this is also known as the ultimate boon, where the hero, having faced his worst fear, seizes the object of his quest. Hans has his own reward of seizing of the sword. The FBI has shut down the power, and the villains finally get the vault open, and they seize their rewards in the form of millions and millions of dollars in bearer bonds, these big, thick paper certificates. McClane finds a restroom and patches himself up. He gets on the radio with Powell, who reveals why he's been assigned to a desk. He shot a kid. And as a sort of quid pro quo to that emotional admission, McClane finds himself able to admit that he was a jerk not to support his wife's promotion and her move to L.A. And he tells Al, I got a bad feeling. I don't know if I'm going to make it through this. Please tell Holly I'm sorry.
Exactly.
So the reward here is the knowledge that if he survives this, he's now equipped to save his marriage, or at least if he can't save his marriage, to regain the respect of the woman he loves.
Okay.
And to me, this is that echo of that second shot in the movie where you see his wedding ring. You know, McClane is a husband and a father and a cop. That's who he is. And so it's clear that the loss of this, his wife and his kids, as much as he identifies with his job, because he's kind of an old school guy, this is a missing for him. Yeah. And he's able to realize now how much he cares about this woman.
So good, Jeff. Damn.
So to me, that's the seizing of the sword, because it doesn't matter what happens from here on out. They can't take that away from him. That's the thing that has changed in him.
Yeah, that's great. I have nothing I can say to counter that. You are completely correct.
Well, in that case,
you win. You won podcasting.
I won it podcast. I win it movie. In that case, let's take a break.
Okay.
And when we come back, maybe we'll drink something.
A whiskey, some beers, maybe. Yeah. I don't know what that was all about. We're back from lunch. Did you enjoy your Gardein burger?
That was a damn fine veggie burger, I'm not going to lie. I could have eaten another one.
Would you like a drink?
I would.
Hopefully, in keeping with tradition so far, I have found a beverage that is named quite appropriately for our project here.
I feel like you've set the bar so high. I mean, you had Death Star Imperial Stout, and then you had Redemption Rye. Unless there's something called, like, I Love Die Hard beer, I just can't see how you're going to beat that.
Okay, why don't I hand this bag across the table to you, and then you can go ahead and open it at your...
All right. I'm going to pull the bottle out of the bag.
Yep.
No way! No way! Yippee-ki-yay whiskey.
Isn't that cool?
How did you find it?
I nearly messed myself when I discovered that.
I don't blame you. High West Yippee-ki-yay, a blend of straight rye whiskeys, finished in vermouth and Syrah barrels. Let's drink this.
Super cool.
All right, I'm going to open this bottle.
While you're doing that, I have to admit I had a small panic attack while we were at lunch.
Oh, no.
We originally sat at the bar, and I looked up at the shelf, and directly in front of your face, in your eye line, was a bottle of that. And I was terrified that you were going to look up and see it and go, "Hey, look, that's that. Yippee-ki-yay. That would be perfect if you found a bottle of that."
Is that why you insisted is that why you insisted we sit outside?
That's why I said we need to find somewhere else to sit, because I cannot have you look up and see that and then completely ruin the surprise. Wow.
I'm going to pour you your measure.
That had a lot of pop to it.
Oh, that's a weak pour. I'm going to give you more than that.
Yeah, come on, man. Pretend I'm your favorite regular at a bar,
Aww.
and you're the bartender.
You're my
look at
favorite
that
podcast.
color.
Wow, that looks like...
That is a deep amber. Dino DNA.
That's a different movie. This smells more caramely to me than the Redemption Rye.
It does. It's still heavy on the ethanol right away because we've just popped the bottle.
All right, I feel like you should sip it first.
Wow, that's zippy.
All right.
I can't think of another word to describe that. It burns a little bit.
Wow, that is zippy.
There's definitely taste the rye. That kind of sweet, spicy flavor that if you actually bite into a rye grain.
I don't know. I've never done that. Can you do that? This is good. I'm going to take another sip.
Yippee-ki-yay. Okay, here we are at the beginning of Act 3, the first segment of which Vogler calls The Road Back. The Road Back is the portion of the story where the hero has achieved his or her goals, now returns from the special world to the ordinary world. In Campbell, there's a few elements here. One of them is refusal of the return, and that's where the hero is seduced by the special world and is unwilling to return to the ordinary world with whatever wisdom or treasure that they have obtained in the special world. I don't feel that exists in this story. I think John very much wants to get the heck out of Nakatomi Plaza with Holly and resume their marriage.
Yeah.
Now that they are somewhat reconciled.
Yeah, I didn't see it. I guess there's the idea that you can have refusal from without. And if there's a refusal of the return energy here, it's the terrorists trying to prevent John from accomplishing his goal. Or the cops or the FBI helicopters shooting him off the roof counts as a refusal from without. But I certainly don't think John himself is resisting. I think he's eager, like you said, to get back to the ordinary world of not being stuck in a terrorist-occupied tower. The reason why Vogler's contribution to this whole conversation about the hero's journey was so valuable is because he really adapted those mythological motifs for modern storytelling. And I really feel like almost of an age with all of the work that he did at Disney is Die Hard. 88 was Die Hard. 89 was when The Little Mermaid came out, and he was at Disney at that time. So this is really of a piece of the modern storytelling era that Vogler was writing about. So for me, The Road Back, as he describes it, the hero is pursued by vengeful forces that were disturbed when he sees the sword. And so McClane goes to the top floor to see what Hans was up to.
Yeah.
Because he met him face to face, realized he was Hans, ran for his life, and then he's on the phone with Powell on the radio and goes, wait, what was he doing up there?
Yeah.
So he goes up there to check it out, and he discovers the whole top floor is wired with explosives.
Exactly.
And he yells at Al on the CB, oh, God, go double cross. And he's silenced when Carl puts the machine gun to his cheek.
Right.
Here's that vengeful force. You killed my brother, and now it's you and me. And
very good. I feel better now.
Yeah.
I felt like I was missing this huge piece, and that's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
Carl as the vengeful force.
So McClane knocks the gun away, and they have this amazing, cut back and forth to the cops outside and the FBI and Hans in the vault and the whole. All that. And again, you see Alexander Godunov's fighting skills. He's so elegant. Meanwhile,
he's just beating John McClane,
kicking his ass.
Yeah.
And by the way, the screenplay has all this dialogue that's not in the movie. And instead, McClane is like, your brother squealed when he's just absolutely trying to infuriate Carl. The other thing that happens is Hans realizes that Holly is McClane's wife and takes her hostage.
Right.
And so as his minions are flushing all the hostages to the roof to blow them up, he takes Holly to the vault. They're collecting the bearer bonds. McClane goes to the roof, learns where Holly is, and then tries to flush the hostages down.
By firing a machine gun to frighten all of them as the FBI helicopter is going by. And the FBI is like, oh, there's a terrorist on the roof shooting machine guns. Let's try to take him out.
My favorite Johnson & Johnson moment So you've got Robert Davi on his helicopter, absolutely gleeful. This is like,
it's like
just like
Saigon.
And the other guy goes, I was in junior high, right? So then, after that Saigon comment, the next thing we see is McClane back in the lobby going through that waterfall and the fountain, and he's all, bare-chested with the chain. He looks like he's in Vietnam. I just thought that was a really interesting juxtaposition.
Ooh,
he's in
I didn't
the jungle.
pick up on that.
Oh,
Very
yeah.
nice.
There's all the plants
Very
hanging
nice.
over and stuff.
This is after the roof has blown.
Yes. Oh, yes.
And he's tied the fire hose to himself. He's dove off the roof, had to shoot the window to get into the building, which, fortunately for him, he ended up diving through the 30th floor, which has the pond. So as the FBI helicopter is falling down the side of the building, it explodes right at the 30th floor, which blows the windows in, and John escapes by diving into the pool.
It's an over-the-top movie, but they make this particular scenario plausible.
Yeah.
So then, I would argue that this is still part of the road back. McClane catches up with Hans and his minion, and he has Holly.
After realizing that he only has 2 bullets left.
The sparks are flying, and we kind of see John in silhouette limping down this hallway with the machine gun, and his muscles are just oily with sweat. He just looks like...
And blood. He's messed up. He's burned. He's cut. He's bleeding.
The thing that's astounding about that shot is they really did a great job of going from casual business traveler to Rambo. And it's been like, he's been in LA for 3 hours maybe. And the transformation is amazing. So Hans has a gun to Holly's head, and they have that amazing exchange. And Alan Rickman says,
Oh, yes. What was it you said to me before? Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
that is the moment to me where Alan Rickman said, I'm going to be Severus Snape. I'm going to be the Sheriff of Nottingham. He absolutely owned that movie in a James Bond villain way. One thing we didn't talk about is I really think Bruce Willis is incredible in this movie. He's an incredible athlete. He's an incredible performer. And that scene in the bathroom when he's picking pieces of glass out of his foot and telling Al Powell,
this is the end of the road for me.
Tell my wife I'm sorry. He is so emotionally, as from an actor's point of view, he's so emotionally connected in that moment. He's more successful than any action star since Rutger Hauer, in Blade Runner. He's just absolutely perfect in that role.
Wow.
And I can't say enough about him in that movie. I think he became a caricature of himself in some other movies, and in some other movies he's fantastic, but in that moment he is A+ actor and an A+ movie star. Anyway, here's what I wanted to say. I teased you at the beginning that I was going to talk about the anti-feminist theme in this movie. And we've talked a little bit about the sexual harassment, but in this scene, our lovely independent Holly Gennaro becomes an absolute squealing damsel in distress. She is not in control. And Bonnie Bedelia does a great job. I mean, she is absolutely freaked out.
Right.
McClane pulls his gun out of his back, shoots Hans, shoots the minion, and then Hans topples out the window, but he's got Holly by the wrist.
Right. Holding her by what I believe is the expensive Rolex watch that Harry Ellis had given her for her contributions.
Yeah. Here's the one symbol she has of her accomplishment at the company. And in order to save her, McClane has to strip it from her. And so there's this feeling like McClane, in order to come to terms with the fact that he's been a dick in their marriage, has to get shot and pursued by terrorists. And in order for him to reconcile with her, he has to strip her of the symbol of the very thing that he's then claiming to have acknowledged her for. She has to be reduced to this, blubbering victim for her to become lovable again. And that wouldn't fly in 2017. And I know that I'm really sticking a lever in there and pulling it as hard as I can, but they didn't have to make it about the Rolex that she got because she made this big deal. And Holly could have been directed to be a little bit more in control, the way she has been for the rest of the movie. And I just felt like that moment, kind of like the Harry Ellis moments, were played for the cheap thrill of the scene instead of the emotional through line of the movie. And I thought it cheapened his transformation and her transformation. And then there's a thing in the resurrection and the return with the elixir that I'll kind of close this loop of thought that I'm having.
It's interesting. I didn't have the offended reaction that you did.
All right, so
then Hans Gruber falls to his death.
And a great death scene reminiscent of Christopher Walken's death in 1987's A View to a Kill.
Jack Nicholson's Joker in 1989's Batman.
I will say, when I was an actor, when you got a death scene, that was like dessert. And I can't believe Alan Rickman's very first movie ever. He gets a great entrance, and he gets a fantastic death scene.
Yeah.
The next section of Act 3 is Resurrection, and this is...
Hold the phone now. Hold the phone. There's some Campbellian elements here.
Tell me.
They're kind of in the same column as the road back, so I don't know if I'm jumping ahead or behind.
Well, if you're going past Hans Gruber's death, you're going ahead, but go on.
Okay, no, then you proceed, because this is a return. Yeah, no, you go.
All right. So, Resurrection, the hero is purified by death, either in a literal or a symbolic way, and returns to the land of the living, a changed person. And this is what Campbell called crossing of the return threshold. There's no white Christmas in Los Angeles, but as the camera pans down from the 30th floor to the chaos of the police and the media vans below, we see the stolen bearer bonds are falling
like snowflakes,
like snow as they emerge from Nakatomi Plaza. And a side note, this is based on something from the book. Part of the terrorist plan in the book is to steal $6 million in cash and throw it out the window and have it fly. So that actually is an image taken from the book. McClane and Al meet face-to-face for the first time. And just as Dwayne T. Johnson, the deputy police chief, is bitching out McClane.
Debriefing.
And he's every bit the principal in Breakfast Club.
Yeah.
Carl pops up with a machine gun.
Zombie Carl,
looking absolutely terrifying.
Yeah.
Somehow, in that very short period of time, he got down 30 floors in a working elevator and was able to sneak past whatever cops
after being strangled by a chain. That's how John McClane defeated him, was like wrapping a chain around his neck and hanging him.
He
got out of that somehow.
Tough dude.
Yeah.
And of course, Al shoots him. It's a resurrection. Carl is resurrected after having been hung.
Yeah.
Al is resurrected from the death of his service as an effective police officer.
Right.
You know, he's been unable to use his weapons since that night he shot the kid.
Right.
And it's also a rescue from without.
Exactly.
All in one. So that's how I see Resurrection playing out in Die Hard.
I agree. I've got Zombie Carl here as a rescue from without.
We've come to the final chapter of the hero's journey.
Okay, so Freedom to Live. When John introduces Holly to Sergeant Al Powell, he says, "This is Holly Gennaro." And Holly corrects him and says, "McClane." John has won his wife's trust again, because now she is acknowledging that I'm going to use my last name again and we're going to try to make this work. Even though he's been a jerk in the past, he went through all of this. So this is somebody I want to partner with. Argyle escorts John and Holly McClane into the back of the limousine, and the limo drives away. I feel like this is mastery of two worlds, I think. That's another one of the elements here. Although I feel like you maybe see that more in the sequels. Because the movie ends right there. They get in the limo, they drive away, and then roll credits. You don't see...
He won as a cop, and he wins as a husband.
Yeah.
That's the master of the two worlds.
Oh, well done.
Yeah,
okay.
And I agree with you that is absolutely the elixir, is he has, at least for now, saved the marriage.
Yeah. My interpretation was cop and then Rambo. So that was the moment where, he's got to cross back and forth. And he doesn't have to do that again until Die Hard 2.
Interesting.
I agree with you, though. I think that's a much better interpretation, that his two worlds are cop and husband, because that's been set up from the very beginning, and I feel like an idiot for not picking up on that as clearly as you did.
But I think you articulated the return with the elixir perfectly well. This scene bothered me because in that last scene, if you watch her performance, she's just like totally staring at John like he is the Adonis that rescued her from hell. And she gives up her last name in that scene. And while on the one hand, the dad and husband in me was like, hey, that's a win. She acknowledged, hey, I am married to this guy. Right. On the other hand, I wanted John to really have to pay the price that he said he was willing to pay on the radio. That would have felt more real to me. And I think it would have been more graceful if the movie were being made now. For her just to acknowledge that John said that and look at him like, yeah, you get me now. we don't have to be separated because you do see me as, instead of saying, no, I'll fold myself back into you now because you saved my life. That's my take on the anti-feminist themes in Die Hard. That's it for this episode. Join us next month when we will be analyzing Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale.
If you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, wherever fine podcasts are given away free of charge.
And if you love what you heard, please take a minute to give us a review. That makes a big difference to our egos.
Thanks to Taylor Jordan for our amazing Hero's Journey fanfare and bumper music, to Dean Ethington at DAE Design for our logo, and to High West Distillery for the Yippee-Ki-Yay Rye. I'm super excited that exists because I think that was as perfect as it could possibly get as a special drink for this episode.
Yeah, good luck with a Handmaid's Ale.
Handmaid's Ale. Well, if there's a Balm of Gilead, maybe somebody has to have created one. I'll just have to find it.
Die Hard is copyright 1988 20th Century Fox.
We're proud to be a part of the 1888 Center family of podcasts. 1888 serves as a regional catalyst for the preservation, presentation, and promotion of cultural heritage and literary arts.
You can visit the center's cafe, gallery, and bookshop physically in historic downtown Orange or online at 1888.center.
If you want to see what we're reading and watching next, visit us at heroesjourneypodcast.com. Follow us on Twitter at heroespodcast, and like us on Facebook at facebook.com/heroesjourneypodcast.
Until next time,
journey on.